But today, we are not having to follow the traditional linear Hollywood model. Today, due to the democratization of technology and by now extension generative AI, you have creatives that can quickly pivot and generate these ideas and reach mass audiences. And so we're not looking at a linear framework anymore. We're looking at non-linear creative output. And it's a very touchy subject as well, because it's essentially like Pandora's box, right? The floodgates are open, and a 12-year-old in India could be creating a Hollywood budget level film now with just their laptops. So we're truly seeing the democratization of technology, but at the same time, it's really important to protect the integrity of human creatives, and we're going to be seeing, kind of like we've seen with the cycle of, I'm also a music producer, and so I rode that wave of the democratization of sampling and access to plugins and music production, where it wasn't just your major record labels that would be creating Grammy Award winning music. Now you'll have some kid in a bedroom producing Grammy Award winning songs. We're seeing this now. There was Grimes doing Elf Tech with her own voice clone in her community, creating that. So they were licensing that music and releasing it on distribution streaming platforms like Spotify. But I think it's like healthy competition in the sense that Hollywood is crumbling, and many people know that. And it will come down to who are the small ships that can pivot quickly. And so that is the beauty of being a founder of a startup. And so, yes, I do see it as a threat, but I also see it as an opportunity, because there's ways for new legacy to be made, new creative legacy to be made. And we're seeing even in the media, even people from Hollywood like Ben Affleck just did a deal with Netflix in the last week or so, in terms of creating this technology that doesn't remove the filmmaker as the artist, but it trains it on their own daily filming and just makes the process more efficient and effective. So that company is called Interpositive. And so a lot of new opportunities are unlocking where it can serve the greater good of what Hollywood's trying to do, but it's also allowing new players to come through.
Welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. I'm your host, Professor Ashley Braganza, and it delights me to welcome to this episode Samantha Tauber from Vinci. Samantha, I wonder if you could give the audience an introduction to yourself and to Vinci as well, please.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for having me. Hello, everybody. I'm Samantha Tauber. I'm Australian, currently living in London. I am the founder of my company, Vinci. It's spelled VNCCII. The name Vinci was inspired by the polymath, Leonardo da Vinci. And in the spirit of trying to understand the nature of being and being a self-prescribed polymath, I called my company Vinci. In 2018, I created an alter ego digital avatar persona by the name of Vinci. And fast forward to today, and she's the lead protagonist of I don't say science fiction, a science futures franchise that I am building that crosses all forms of media, from music to storytelling to writing books to synthetic digital media storytelling. So there's a combination of both human and AI creative output.
Great, thank you. Clearly, you are hugely creative to have not just come up with the characters, but to have brought them to life in the way that you have. How is AI a catalyst for creativity, Samantha?
AI can act as a catalyst for creativity because I believe it accelerates idea generation. It lowers technical barriers. It's democratization of technology, and it enables new forms of expression. There are many ways that AI can serve creatives. I think the place it thrives the most is in the idea generation stage, kind of like the pre-production for the general creative practice, because all of a sudden you have a new AI co-collaborator and partner. So there's ideas that can be generated that you've maybe never even thought of before.
And in terms of moving AI into creativity, I guess in terms of your own business model, how has AI supported you in terms of, enabling your business model to come to life?
That's a great question. And I definitely can attest that there's a lot of, I'd say, fear emotionally in the creative industry that AI will replace human creators and their job and their work. But like any form of technological innovation, it's always about the early adopters and the people that can find ways and business models to collaborate and see it as a symbiotic partner and forge new business models that might have not been even possible before. So that is very much the nature of the Vinci project. That is the nucleus, that's the ethos. It's about innovating, it's about embracing these new technologies and not seeing it as a form or a force of fear. So what I am trying to do is build, as I said earlier, a science futures franchise. So traditionally, if we look at the franchises out there, from Star Wars to Star Trek or Harry Potter or even the Marvel canon, you would have the comics, and then you would have the films, and then you would have the merchandise, and then you would have the theme park experience. But today, we are not having to follow the traditional linear Hollywood model. Today, due to the democratization of technology and by now extension generative AI, you have creatives that can quickly pivot and generate these ideas and reach mass audiences. And so we're not looking at a linear framework anymore. We're looking at non-linear creative output. And there's many ways to generate different business models. So for instance, world building, it's not just humans that are populating, let's say, these real-time simulation experiences. You can have AI avatars and AI agents as well. So AI agents could be deployed on the creative side, on the production side, but then they can also become personas in your world building scenario and form avatars and players and have characters in their own form of identity and expression. So this has opened up, I would say, a Pandora's box of opportunities. I am working on a model right now, which I'm deploying at Vinci, where I am very much still a purist in the sense of being a human creative, because I've written my own story, which I'll talk about later, with no AI whatsoever. It's the first book of a trilogy, and that's all human-generated IP. And so the way I see it is that's, let's say, the brand Bible or the lore, Lore, of this story world, of this universe. And that is the seed IP. But then with the derivative IP, traditionally you would have human creative IP, for instance, the Mandalorian spin-off to Star Wars. But today we have opportunities for AI as well in terms of the derivative IP. And this can form part of this, I'd say, living, breathing ecosystem. So it's like this dynamic mythos engine is my working title at the moment, dynamic mythos engine, because it's not just the creation of the IP, it's also now an ecosystem, it's an application layer, and it's also a way to generate income and involve your fans, involve your community, and involve your audience in new ways that weren't possible before today with AI, because it's unlocking many creative opportunities for your community and the audience that supported this seed IP to co-create with you.
You used a couple of phrases there, Samantha. I'm going to ask you to just unpack them a little bit. One is you talked about the non-linear creative model. Just explain that to me, please.
The nonlinear creative model, we really saw it expedite in, let's say, the Gartner hype cycle era of the word metaverse, which emerged, let's say, out of the pandemic lockdown in terms of the popular zeitgeist embracing the term. And we've seen this for a long time, as you know, from Second Life and these real-time game simulations where people take on digital avatar personas and literally have a second life. But when we experience the metaverse and we bring now AI as an ecosystem layer into the picture, it is unlocking new ways to co-create with the IP.
Thank you for that explanation. The other phrase that you used was the dynamic mythos engine. Could you unpack that for me as well, please?
The Dynamic Mythos Engine is a working title, which is a way I explain what I'm essentially building with this Science Futures franchise. I was inspired by a fellow brand strategist. Her name is Zoe Scarman. And a couple years ago, after the popularization of the word metaverse and those models that emerged, she coined the term the multiplayer brand. And so that was an advice, a strategic advice for brands to look through the lens of how do you create non-linear content and involve your community with co-creation. So inspired by this concept of the multiplayer brand, I adjusted the term to cater to what I'm essentially building, which is I'm building a mythology. I'm building a cosmic mythology around this Vinci character, which is the name of my company, but also the lead protagonist. Vinci is a superheroine from the intergalactic future, the lead of the science trilogy, futures trilogy that I'm writing. And the dynamic mythos engine, why dynamic? Because it's not static, it's living, it's breathing, and there's a potential for real world, real time simulations, very much like the metaverse. So imagine if Harry Potter launched today and you wanted to be one of the houses in Hogwarts, like Gryffindor or Slytherin, rather than them just hiring extras on the set when they film the big Warner Brothers movies, instead you're there from the very beginning supporting the author or the seed human creator of the franchise. And all of a sudden, you don't just have cultural equity, but you potentially have monetization equity in the brand because you're supporting it from its early stages. And so the way it will work is there's a few layers. So as I said earlier, stage one is the seed human IP, which is the integrity, it's the purpose, it's the intention of the story. It's the high value originality layer. And I believe it's important to have guardrails in the sense of going, this is the lore, LORE of the story. So this is what it means if you'd like to participate. In the case of the Vinci Dynamic Mythos engine, I'm very much about a positive future, right? That is the agenda, and I'm very upfront with it with everybody in my audience, is I'm a pragmatic optimist. So I'm interested in what technologies can serve humanity and act as a symbiotic partner, and what our future will look like hundreds of years from now when we scale up in terms of the Kardashev scale, when we become a multiplanetary spacefaring species. And what does the picture look like between AI and humans in the future? And I think about it from all verticals, whether it's healthcare, education, technology, creativity, and the list goes on. So that's stage one. Stage one is the seed human IP. Stage two is the AI derivative IP engine, and that's the scalability layer. So kind of like I said earlier, like The Mandalorian was a derivative IP spin-off to Star Wars. But the difference is now it's not just human-generated creativity, it's AI derivative creativity. So once the seed IP exists, generative AI can create spin-off characters, it can generate episodic stories, it can localize narratives culturally, it can build interactive storylines, and it can essentially produce low-budget films, animation, and games. And of course, I believe we're all inherently creative, but it's a way to involve the community. It's a way to involve your fans in the creation layer. So you can create APIs and applications and agents for them to fit within the guardrails of the lore of this universe, but also creatively contribute to the story. And then stage three is the Storyverse platform itself in terms of the ecosystem layer, the distribution layer. So you're creating a story platform where audiences explore the evolving story worlds, the creators build derivative works, and the AI personalizes narrative experiences. So it's essentially a real-time sandbox simulation experience. And stage four is the licensing and revenue architecture. So it's not just having cultural equity as a fan or as a co-creator, you're having a potential monetization stake in the story as well. So it forms part of the model of canon licensing and AI derivative licensing. And we've seen some examples like this setting precedent with OpenAI's deal with Disney December last year, where they're licensing characters within the guardrails of OpenAI, allowing the creative community to co-create within the lore of the story. So Ashley, this is just the very beginning. So it's a very
Yeah,
interesting time to be a creative, that's for sure.
it certainly is. And I guess one of the big challenges of being a creative in the age of AI is the protection of IP.
Mm,
How do you see IP being protected in this
mm,
universe that's being created?
mm. It's a very important question, and it's a very touchy subject as well because it's essentially like Pandora's box, right? The floodgates are open, and a 12-year-old in India could be creating a Hollywood budget level film now with just their laptops. So that's we're truly seeing the democratization of technology, but at the same time, it's really important to protect the integrity of human creatives, and we're going to be seeing kind of like we've seen with the cycle of I'm also a music producer, and so I rode that wave of the democratization of sampling and access to plugins and music production, where it wasn't just your major record labels that would be creating Grammy Award winning music. Now you'll have some kid in a bedroom producing Grammy Award winning songs. So it's the same now for Hollywood as well. But to answer your question, yeah, there's a risk of IP dilution, especially in terms of building a canon governance. There'll be legal battles, of course, over derivative originality. There are ethical concerns about these large language models scraping the internet and ripping off creatives and their copyrighted works. So it's really important to follow the news, follow the media, and see what's happening in terms of the legal precedents that will be set today and in the next 10 years, because the value of human creativity will never go away. And I think now more than ever, humans are going to appreciate artwork made by humans, and not just the outputs, but also the process behind it. People are
Mhm.
inherently fascinated by why, not just the what. Like, it's not just the product. It's why did you create this? What purpose, what reason, and how is the other important question asked. How did you make this? Because that's integrity. And I think it will be really important to be transparent. I'm very transparent with what I do. When I do my presentations, if there's a generative AI film that I've made, I say, this is the Vinci human created character that I trained, and this I used a tool like OpenAI or Google VO3 Flow to create this music video. So it's important to be transparent with your audience. And then I say, with all my music production, it's all human created. I sing, I use my own voice. I don't use AI voice clones or anything like that. So at the end of the day, I think it comes down to personal choice as well for why are you using these tools or why you're not using these tools. Because at the end of the day, creativity is meant to be fun, and it's meant to unlock idea generations. So for me, if I want to communicate a story, the music's very personal to me as well as the writing. So I don't use AI. But if I want to bring Vinci to life and I'm not a traditional animator, I'm very fascinated by the realm of generative AI and the way I can quickly create these idea generations to bring Vinci to life and grow my audience. As long as you're transparent about it and you're training it on your own character and models and you're respective of other creatives' IP.
And I guess that is really what I'm trying to get to is around when another creative comes into contact or engages with the universe that you're creating, how is that creative's IP being protected? And how do you see it? One is how do you see it being protected? And then how do you see it being monetized?
Mm. Well, we're seeing this now. There was Grimes doing Elf Tech with her own voice clone in her community, creating that. So they were licensing that music and releasing it on distribution streaming platforms like Spotify. So there are brands and artists out there that are paving the way for these sort of community co-creation models and monetization models. I think it's important that when a creative collaborates with their community, that obviously you own your IP. I've trademarked Vinci internationally. It's a registered trademark, copyright over my novel and my characters. So the community know that they're investing both monetarily or culturally in a brand that is protected. So you have a duty to inform your community that, like, you've done the work, you've trademarked the name, you've copyrighted it. There's that ethical guardrail in the sense of this is your story, this is your IP, and you're contributing to it, because then you've got a solid foundation, right? And then in terms of the AI application layer for the scalability, of course, then you can partner with different companies. That's one way of doing it, or creating your own proprietary technology and scaling that. So what I've done is I have published independently. I've created my own publishing imprint called Galactaisance. The word stands for galaxy, and AI, well, it could be artificial intelligence or it could be artistic intelligence. And the science part of the word, I made up a word, is like a renaissance, because I really do believe we're in a new digital cultural renaissance, as well as a space renaissance, because I'm building a science futures franchise. And so when you create that sort of that ecosystem, that layer, then your fans, your community can create under that imprint. So in essence, it's like creating your own record label.
Okay, very interesting. I guess you've mentioned Disney, you mentioned Warner, you've mentioned Harry Potter. I mean, is your business model a threat to Hollywood and the production that, engine that is Hollywood?
I believe so. But I think it's like healthy competition, in the sense that Hollywood is crumbling, and many people know that. And it will come down to who are the small ships that can pivot quickly. And so that is the beauty of being a founder of a startup. And so, yes, I do see it as a threat, but I also see it as an opportunity, because there's ways for new legacy to be made, new creative legacy to be made. And we're seeing even in the media, even people from Hollywood, like Ben Affleck, just did a deal with Netflix in the last week or so, in terms of creating this technology that doesn't remove the filmmaker as the artist, but it trains it on their own daily filming and just makes the process more efficient and effective. So that company is called Interpositive. And so a lot of new opportunities are unlocking where it can serve the greater good of what Hollywood's trying to do, but it's also allowing new players to come through.
And I understand from our discussions earlier that you have a book, and that the book that you've got is heading to the moon. Tell us about that.
Thanks for asking, Ashley. Yes, it's not fully related to AI, but there is a full circle moment, actually, and I'll explain. Well, when I first created my Vinci character, by the way, I originally positioned her as an AI superheroine. Over time, as I evolved and the project evolved, I worked out she is fictionally not an AI character. And when you read the first book of the story, you'll learn more about her and where she's from. Spoiler alert, she's in essence a multidimensional being. And so the way the book's going to the moon, it's quite a serendipitous story, but I was reached out to by a nonprofit called Interstellar Foundation that were inspired by the original golden record to space based on Carl Sagan's work. It's the furthest human-made artifact in deep space on the Voyager. And it encapsulates recordings of greetings in different languages from people around Earth and things like that. So through that community, I met this gentleman called Frank White. He's the author of the book called The Overview Effect, Space Exploration and Human Evolution. And he ended up writing the foreword for my story. And the term the overview effect emerged because his role in media was to interview all the astronauts from the Apollo mission and all the different missions. And he noticed something very profound. They would come back to Earth forever changed. They would see the Earth essentially as no borders, and conflicts would dissolve from that perspective of being in space. And he coined the term the overview effect to symbolize that very profound psychological phenomenon. So to do a full circle moment to earlier when I talked about the inherent why create, especially when AI can do your work and your job, I have a pure intention and a purpose, which is to share the overview effect through my Science Futures franchise and storytelling, because essentially I'm trying to guide humanity towards a positive future, a future where we're not made redundant by AI, but we find a harmonious, peaceful relationship, one where so much so that we can navigate the solar system and by extension the cosmos together and make amazing discoveries and explorations about what it really means to be human on this beautiful planet Earth. So Frank wrote the foreword for my story, and then it led me to connecting with another gentleman called Bruce Ha, who's the founder and inventor of this analog technology called nanofiche. And nanofiche is the medium that has laser etched my 444 human-created pages from the book onto this nano nickel gold-backed material, super microscopic, that can withstand solar radiation, and they say can last for 1 million years on the lunar surface. So my book is part of a payload that's scheduled for July this year, boosted by a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket aboard NASA's Astrobotics Griffin Lander 1 mission. And when it lands, it will be part of the first ever Galactic Library Preservation for Humanity. The code name of the project's called Glyph, like a hieroglyph. And why is this important? Well, first of all, it's really a way to launch actually a franchise, literally, because it sets a very pure seed intention for what I'm trying to do here. And also it makes you think about not just ROI in the sense of return of investment, it also makes you think about ROI through a different lens, which is return on inspiration. Because I truly believe, Ashley, that civilization doesn't just inherit our spreadsheets, it inherits our values. So what sort of legacy do we want to leave for our future ancestors when they read that book on the moon, under a microscope, of course?
Samantha, thank you so much for joining me on the AI Adoption Podcast. You've provided some fascinating insights into how AI and creativity can come together to create something which is hugely powerful. There is so much discourse out there about how AI is going to come in and take away from people's creativity and replace people in the creative space. I think you started to show that actually AI used effectively and used imaginatively can actually provide people, not just those who are deemed to be creative, but just about anyone with creativity, to use these technologies to generate ideas, in your case, to generate a franchise model of a business that has longevity and can be sustained over time. So thank you so much for joining me and my listeners.
Thank you, Ashley.